The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, its official seal mocking me from my kitchen table. I'd been expecting bad news for months, but nothing could have prepared me for what I read. The bank claimed my farm was abandoned. Abandoned. After 43 years of working this land, of bleeding and sweating into every acre, they had the audacity to call it abandoned. My name is Tom Bradley, and this 160-acre farm in rural Kansas has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather bought it in 1952, my father expanded it, and I've been its caretaker since I was 22. Every morning for over 4 decades, I've walked these fields, tended to the crops, and maintained every building on this property. The letter stated that due to apparent abandonment and lack of maintenance, the property would be inspected in 30 days. If found truly abandoned, it would be seized and sold at auction to recover the outstanding mortgage balance. Outstanding balance? That was rich. I'd been negotiating payment terms for months, sending partial payments, doing everything I could to keep this place afloat after the drought destroyed last year's harvest. I read the letter 3 times, my coffee growing cold as the words sank in. They were planning to steal my farm, and they were using bureaucratic language to make it legal. The inspection date was circled in red, November 15th, 10 a.m. I looked out my kitchen window at the fields I'd planted, the barn I'd repaired countless times, the fence posts I'd replaced just last month. Abandoned? This farm was more alive than ever, and I was about to prove it. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay in my father's old bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar creaks of the farmhouse settling. By dawn, I had a plan forming in my mind. Unconventional, maybe even crazy, but it might just work. The bank's claim of abandonment hinged on their inspection, finding no signs of recent activity or habitation. They expected to find an empty house, overgrown fields, and broken-down equipment. They were wrong on all counts, but I knew how these corporate types operated. They'd spend 15 minutes walking around, take a few photos, and rubber stamp their predetermined conclusion. I spent the next week documenting everything. I photographed every repair I'd made, every maintained fence line, every piece of functioning equipment. I organized receipts for recent purchases, seed, fertilizer, fuel, parts for the tractor. I even got statements from neighbors confirming I'd been working the land continuously. But documentation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to catch them in the act of their deception. That's when I remembered the old John Deere 4020 sitting in the machine shed. It had been my father's pride and joy, and though I'd upgraded to newer equipment, I'd kept it running out of sentiment. The cab was enclosed, tinted windows, perfect for observation. I tested the plan several times, parking the tractor in different locations around the farm, checking sight lines and escape routes. From inside the cab, I could see the main approach to the house while remaining completely hidden. The tractor looked like just another piece of farm equipment, which it was, except it would have an occupant they'd never expect. The inspection was 5 days away. I was ready. The weekend before the inspection, I worked like a man possessed. Every fence was checked and tightened. The barn doors were oiled and functioning perfectly. I even painted the mailbox and fixed the loose board on the front porch that had been bothering me for months. My neighbor, Bill Henderson, stopped by Saturday afternoon. He'd been farming the adjacent property for 30 years and knew exactly what was happening. "Tom, this is insane what they're doing to you," he said, shaking his head as we stood by the fence line. "Everyone knows you've been working this land. Hell, I see you out here every day." "That's exactly what I'm counting on, Bill. When this goes to court, and it will go to court, I'll need witnesses like you." Bill nodded grimly. "You know I'll testify for you, but what's this plan you mentioned? You sounded pretty mysterious on the phone." I explained my strategy of hiding in the tractor during their inspection. Bill's eyebrows shot up, but then he started grinning. "You know what? That's brilliant. Catch them red-handed in their lies." He paused, studying the John Deere. "You sure that old girl will start when you need her to?" "Rebuilt the engine myself last spring. She purrs like a kitten." We spent the rest of the afternoon going over the plan. Bill would position himself in his own field with a clear view of my property, ready to serve as a witness to whatever unfolded. I'd be in the tractor, recording everything on my phone. Sunday night, I called my lawyer and left a message explaining what I intended to do. I wanted everything documented and legal. November 15th dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp autumn morning that made farming feel like the most important job in the world. I was up before sunrise, running through my mental checklist one final time, phone charged and ready to record. Tractor fueled and positioned perfectly behind the machine shed, where it had a clear view of the house but remained partially concealed. I dressed in my usual work clothes, faded jeans, flannel shirt, and my father's old John Deere cap. If anyone did spot me, I'd look exactly like what I was, a farmer going about his daily business on his own land. At 9:30, I climbed into the tractor cab and settled in for what might be a long wait. The leather seat, worn smooth by decades of use, felt familiar and comforting. Through the windshield, I could see the entire front yard, the driveway, and the approach to the house. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, hiding on my own property, preparing to prove I wasn't abandoning the place that had been my life's work. The bank had forced me into the position of a spy in my own home. At 9:55, I heard the rumble of vehicles coming up the gravel drive. My heart rate picked up, but my hands were steady as I activated the recording function on my phone. Through the tinted glass of the cab, I watched as two vehicles pulled up to my house, a white sedan and a pickup truck with the bank's logo on the door. 3 people got out, time to see exactly how thorough their inspection would be. The first person out of the sedan was a woman in a business suit, clearly out of place on a working farm. Her high heels sank slightly into the gravel as she surveyed the property with obvious distaste. The second was a man in his 50s, also in business attire, carrying a clipboard and camera. From the pickup truck emerged a younger man in work clothes, probably their local contact. I started recording as they gathered near the front porch, their voices carrying clearly in the still morning air. "All right, let's make this quick," the woman said, checking her watch. "I have another appointment at 11:30. The man with the clipboard nodded. "Standard abandonment inspection. We need photos of the exterior, evidence of neglect or lack of maintenance, and documentation that the property appears uninhabited." My jaw clenched. They were already talking about finding evidence of abandonment before they'd even looked at anything. This wasn't an inspection. It was a predetermined conclusion looking for justification. The younger man seemed less certain. "Ma'am, I drive by this place regularly for my route, and I've seen activity here. Lights on in the evenings, vehicles coming and going." The woman waved dismissively. "That's probably just neighbors or squatters. The bank's records show no contact from the owner in 60 days and no full mortgage payments in 6 months. The property is clearly abandoned. They spent exactly 12 minutes walking around the exterior of the house. 12 minutes to evaluate 43 years of my life. The woman took photos of everything, but I noticed she was careful to frame her shots to avoid showing the obvious signs of maintenance and recent activity. When they photographed the barn, she deliberately excluded the newly repaired door. I watched in growing anger as they continued their sham inspection. The man with the clipboard made notes, but from my vantage point, I could see he was writing before even looking at what he was supposedly documenting. They had clearly decided on their findings before arriving. "The exterior shows obvious signs of neglect," the woman dictated as the man wrote. "Peeling paint, damaged roofing, overgrown vegetation." I nearly laughed out loud. I'd painted the trim just last month. The roof was in excellent condition, and I'd mowed the yard 3 days ago. They were describing a completely different property. The younger man looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, with respect, that paint looks pretty fresh to me, and the grass has clearly been cut recently." "Are you a property inspector?" she snapped. "Because I am, and I'm telling you this property shows clear signs of abandonment." They moved toward the machine shed where I was hidden. My heart pounded as they approached, but they stayed focused on the main building, never venturing close enough to notice the occupied tractor. The woman photographed the shed from a distance, making sure to capture the angle that made it look most run down. "Equipment appears abandoned and non-functional," she dictated. I was sitting in a perfectly functional piece of that abandoned equipment, recording every word of their lies. The John Deere's engine was warm and ready. I'd started it briefly before they arrived to ensure everything was working perfectly. Their inspection of the shed lasted less than 5 minutes. They never opened the doors to see the well-maintained equipment inside, never checked to see if anything was actually functional. They were building a case, not conducting an honest evaluation. As they prepared to leave, I made my decision. I couldn't let them drive away with their fabricated report unchallenged. I turned the key, and the John Deere's diesel engine roared to life with a satisfying rumble that echoed across the farmyard. The effect was immediate and dramatic. All 3 inspectors froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. The woman's face went pale as she realized the implications. Here was a piece of abandoned equipment starting up with someone clearly operating it. I put the tractor in gear and drove slowly out from behind the shed, making sure they could see me clearly through the cab windows. I raised one hand in a casual wave as if greeting neighbors, then continued driving toward them. The younger man started laughing, actually laughing, as the absurdity of the situation hit him. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like this place isn't quite as abandoned as we thought." The woman was frantically whispering to her colleague, but I could hear enough to catch the gist. They were trying to figure out how to spin this development in their report. I parked the tractor about 20 feet from their vehicles and climbed down, my phone still recording in my shirt pocket. I walked toward them with the measured pace of a man who belonged exactly where he was. "Morning, folks," I said pleasantly. "Beautiful day for an inspection, isn't it? I'm Tom Bradley and this is my farm. I understand you're here to check if it's been abandoned." The silence stretched for several seconds. The woman recovered first, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Mr. Bradley, we weren't expecting to find anyone here. Our records indicate this property has been abandoned." Well," I said, gesturing around at the well-maintained farmyard, "as you can see, your records are wrong." The woman, who introduced herself as Ms. Patricia Hendricks from the bank's Property Assessment Division, tried to regain control of the situation. Her colleague, a man named Robert Chen, kept glancing nervously between his clipboard and me, clearly realizing their report was about to become very complicated. "Mr. Bradley, Ms. Hendricks said, her voice taking on a condescending tone, "the bank has had no contact from you regarding your mortgage obligations. The property appeared abandoned based on our preliminary assessment." "Preliminary assessment?" I pulled out my phone, making sure they could see I was holding it. "You mean the assessment where you spent 12 minutes walking around my property, taking carefully angled photos to make everything look run down and dictating false observations about neglect and abandonment?" Robert Chen's face flushed red. "Sir, we're conducting a standard inspection according to bank protocols." "Standard protocols that involve lying about what you observe? I heard every word you said. I recorded every word you said." I gestured toward the tractor. "I was sitting right there in that abandoned, non-functional equipment while you fabricated your report." The younger man, who'd introduced himself as Jake Morrison from the local contractor service, was openly grinning now. "Ma'am, I tried to tell you this place was clearly being maintained. Mr. Bradley, I drive past here twice a week. This farm's been active the whole time." Ms. Hendricks shot Jake a withering look before turning back to me. "Mr. Bradley, regardless of your presence here today, the fact remains that you're in default on your mortgage payments. I've been in communication with the bank for months about payment arrangements. I've made partial payments and submitted multiple proposals for loan modification. The bank has my phone number, my address, and my email. If you wanted to contact me, you could have picked up a phone." The truth was becoming clear to everyone present. This wasn't about abandonment. It was about seizing valuable farmland through bureaucratic manipulation. I decided to press my advantage while they were off balance. "Since you're here to assess the property's condition, let me give you a proper tour. You know, show you all those signs of abandonment and neglect you've been documenting." Ms. Hendricks looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, but she couldn't refuse without making their deception even more obvious. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Bradley. We have sufficient documentation for our report." "Oh, but I insist. Jake here mentioned he's seen activity on the property. Let's verify that, shall we?" I started walking toward the barn. "This building, for instance. Your report says it shows signs of neglect. Let's take a look." I opened the barn doors, revealing the interior I'd spent the previous weekend organizing. Equipment was neatly arranged, tools hung in their proper places, and everything was clean and well maintained. The smell of fresh oil and recently used machinery filled the air. "Funny thing about abandoned farms," I said conversationally. "They usually don't smell like WD-40 and fresh hydraulic fluid." Robert Chen was frantically scribbling notes, probably trying to figure out how to revise their predetermined conclusions. Miss Hendricks maintained her composure, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. They were caught, and she knew it. "The house next," I continued, leading them toward the front porch. "You documented peeling paint and general deterioration. Let's see if that holds up to closer inspection." As we walked, Jake fell into step beside me. "Mr. Bradley, I want you to know I'm going to include everything I've witnessed here in my report. This whole thing stinks to high heaven." I nodded gratefully. Having an independent witness was exactly what I'd hoped for when I'd conceived this plan. I unlocked the front door and gestured for them to enter. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a working farm, lived in, comfortable, and clearly inhabited. Fresh coffee sat in the pot from my morning routine. Yesterday's newspaper lay folded on the kitchen table, and the refrigerator hummed quietly, stocked with food. "Abandoned properties," I observed, "usually don't have fresh milk in the refrigerator or this morning's coffee still warm in the pot." Ms. Hendricks was taking photos, but her heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. Every image would contradict their abandonment claim. Robert Chen had stopped writing entirely, just staring around the obviously inhabited space. I led them through the living room, where my father's old recliner sat next to a stack of farming magazines from the past month. Family photos covered the mantel, 3 generations of Bradleys working this same land. "This is my grandfather," I said, pointing to a black and white photo of a young man standing next to a horse-drawn plow. "He bought this farm in 1952, worked it until the day he died. My father took over, expanded it, modernized it. I've been here for 43 years, and I plan to be here for 43 more." The emotion in my voice was real. This wasn't just about money or property rights. This was about legacy, about family, about the connection between a man and the land he's devoted his life to working. Jake was nodding respectfully. Even Robert Chen looked moved. Ms. Hendricks remained stone-faced, but I could see her resolve weakening. "Mr. Bradley," she said finally, "we'll need to revise our initial assessment based on today's findings." "I certainly hope so. Because what you were planning to submit was fraud, plain and simple." Back outside, the group stood in an awkward circle near their vehicles. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting everything in sharp relief. There was no hiding the obvious signs of an active, well-maintained farm. "Let's talk about what happens next," I said, pulling out a business card. "This is my attorney's information. He'll be expecting a copy of your revised report within 48 hours, Ms." Hendricks took the card reluctantly. "Mr. Bradley, I want to be clear that today's inspection doesn't resolve your mortgage default situation. I understand that perfectly, but it does resolve any question about whether this property has been abandoned, and it raises some serious questions about the bank's assessment procedures." Robert Chen cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, about the recording you mentioned earlier." "Oh, that." I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording that had been running for over an hour. "Don't worry, Robert. I'm sure when your revised report accurately reflects what you observed today, there won't be any discrepancies with the audio record." Jake stepped forward and handed me his card. "Mr. Bradley, I'll be submitting my own independent report about today's inspection. If you need a witness for any legal proceedings, you can count on me." I shook his hand firmly. "I appreciate that, Jake. It's good to know there are still honest people in this business." The message was clear to everyone present. The bank's attempt to seize my property through false abandonment claims had failed spectacularly. They had been caught red-handed in their deception, and now they would have to deal with the legal consequences. Ms. Hendricks was already on her phone, probably calling her supervisor to explain how their slam-dunk property seizure had turned into a potential lawsuit. The vehicles disappeared down my gravel drive, leaving me standing alone in my farmyard. The silence felt different now. Not the quiet of abandonment they'd expected to find, but the peaceful quiet of a working farm between seasons. I walked back to the John Deere, patting its hood affectionately. "Thanks, old girl. You came through when it counted." My phone rang almost immediately. It was my attorney, David Reeves, returning my call from the night before. "Tom, I got your message. Tell me you didn't actually hide in a tractor to spy on bank inspectors." "Okay, I won't tell you that." I explained everything that had happened, from the fraudulent assessment to the recorded evidence I'd gathered. David was quiet for a long moment. "This is either the craziest thing I've ever heard or the most brilliant. Probably both. You realize you've just handed us a massive lawsuit against the bank?" "I realize I've just saved my farm." "That too. Can you email me that recording? And I'll need copies of all those maintenance receipts and neighbor statements you mentioned." I spent the rest of the morning organizing my documentation. Every receipt, every photo, every piece of evidence that proved this farm was not only not abandoned, but actively and lovingly maintained. Bill Henderson called around noon. "Tom, I saw those bank folks leave. How did it go?" "Better than I hoped. They got caught lying about the property condition, and I have it all on recording." "Hot damn, you actually pulled it off. What happens now?" "Now we fight back, and we make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." The phone kept ringing throughout the day. Neighbors who'd heard about the inspection, local farmers who'd faced similar pressure from banks, even a reporter from the county newspaper who'd gotten wind of the story. Within a week, my story had spread throughout the farming community and beyond. The recording I'd made went viral on social media, sparking outrage about bank practices and corporate land grabs. Local news stations picked up the story, and suddenly I was fielding interview requests from across the state. The bank, meanwhile, was in full damage control mode. They'd quietly withdrawn the abandonment claim and were now claiming the whole thing had been a miscommunication. My attorney wasn't buying it. "Tom, they're offering to restructure your loan with very favorable terms," David told me during a phone call. "They want this to go away quietly." "What kind of terms?" Reduced interest rate, extended payment schedule, and they'll waive all the late fees and penalties. Basically, they're willing to give you everything you asked for 6 months ago. It was tempting. The financial pressure would be off, and I could go back to farming without the constant worry about losing the land. But something didn't sit right with me. David, what about other farmers? How many people have lost their land to these same tactics? That's exactly what I was hoping you'd ask. I've been contacted by 3 other families in similar situations just this week. This isn't an isolated incident. I made my decision. Then we don't settle quietly. We make this public, we hold them accountable, and we make sure it doesn't happen again. The bank's lawyers weren't happy with my response. They'd expected me to take their offer and disappear. Instead, I was turning their attempted land grab into a public relations nightmare and a legal precedent. The local Farmers Association asked me to speak at their monthly meeting. Standing at the podium, looking out at faces I'd known for decades, I felt the weight of responsibility. This isn't just about my farm, I told them. It's about all our farms. 6 months later, I stood in the same farmyard where I'd confronted the bank inspectors. But everything had changed. The lawsuit had been settled in my favor, with the bank agreeing to significant policy changes and financial compensation. More importantly, the case had sparked legislative action to protect farmers from predatory abandonment claims. My farm was secure. The mortgage had been restructured with terms I could actually meet, and the publicity had brought new opportunities. A local organic food cooperative had contracted for a portion of my harvest, and I'd started offering farm tours to educate people about agriculture. The old John Deere sat in its usual spot in the machine shed, but now it had a small plaque mounted on the dashboard: the tractor that saved the farm. Visitors always got a kick out of that story. Jake Morrison had become a friend and ally. His honest testimony had been crucial in the legal proceedings, and he'd since started his own property inspection business with a reputation for integrity. The bank had quietly transferred Ms. Hendricks to another department, and Robert Chen had actually reached out to apologize personally. He'd been following orders, he said, but what happened that day had made him question the whole system. As I walked my fields in the evening light, I reflected on how close I'd come to losing everything. The plan to hide in the tractor had been born of desperation, but it had exposed a system designed to cheat honest farmers out of their livelihoods. The land stretched out before me, the same fields my grandfather had worked, that my father had improved, that I'd devoted my life to maintaining. Tomorrow I'd be back out here doing what farmers have always done, working the land, growing food, and preserving something valuable for the next generation. The bank had tried to claim this farm was abandoned. They couldn't have been more wrong. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been quite a journey from that terrifying morning when I received the abandonment notice to where I am today. I hope my experience helps other farmers who might be facing similar challenges. Sometimes you have to get creative to fight back against the system. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What part of the world are you listening from? Have you or someone you know faced similar challenges with banks or corporations? Your stories and support mean everything to me. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are more stories to tell about life on the farm, standing up for what's right, and the importance of protecting our agricultural heritage. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.